Well, folks, we have not fixed it. In some ways, it's worse. So you heard it there. Again. I hear that, it kind of hung up and then kicked in. You know, I think it's this bearing pack in there. So the oil level, unfortunately, at normal levels is higher than that. So I've drained enough off, I believe, where we can pull that off. All right, I got the pulley off with a bearing puller. No drama there, it wasn't worth even filming. A little tapered shaft, came right off, and it's got a keyway, of course. Just getting deeper and deeper in here. Probably pinned, I would think that'd be pinned. I think I'm getting a little separation.
2 hours later.
Whole assembly comes out right as a the back gear. Yeah, there it goes. Look at that. Cool. Well, here's the back side of it. This is a slip fit bearing inside that center support in the casting. You just pull the whole thing out from the front, and it's got a circlip on it, a C-clip. And in the front, there is a seal which isn't even placed correctly. We'll have to pull that out because I suspect there's another C-clip in here. And this bearing has to go in for the front bearing, which I think is bad. The way it's feeling, it's very rough. Certainly could be part of it, but I don't know if it's all of this problem. I mean, I can't think of anything else at this point. I have a short memory because I said the same damn thing about the counter shaft, and that wasn't the problem. So, try hitting that with a heat gun and then see if that'll loosen it up. It usually works. Boy, that is stuck. We're gonna have to try slide hammering it out. And that did it. Yep, there's a circlip in there as I suspected. So it comes in from this side. The whole thing, well actually the bearing comes in from this side because I can see on the back side of it, this is the inside of this casting. There's no opening in there for the bearing. So essentially what we have to do is unclip this and then put this in the press. Support it down here and push the shaft out from that bearing. Then we can push the bearing out. But you can see here, this thing is just not in good shape. It's a 6004, the same as the other sides, the same as the smaller one on that counter shaft. I don't have any more of these. I'm gonna have to run back down to Bearings Marketing, get 2 of them and get a seal. I'll have to bring the seal with me. Might be able to get the paint off it to see the number on it, but he can do that by measurement too. Just doesn't seem right. I mean, I'm not sure if this is it either, but I mean, the motor doesn't sound all that good as well when you turn it on without any load on it, with no belts or anything.
Spoiler alert.
It's not the quietest motor on the planet, but you know, the noise is not coming from down there. The noise is coming from in the gearbox. And I could feel it on the end of that pulley when I put my finger on the center, as I said, when it would do it, when it would spool up. Tell you what, I am not happy about all this. Oh, come on. Ugh. I hate circlips, you know? C-clips basically suck. They should be illegal. There it is. Now we'll go press the son of a gun out. Once I take the other circlip out, which is probably the only one I needed to do. I'm going back to bed. Okay, I can't do that yet. The gears are too big to fit down inside between the rails on the press. Don't despair, because we can just take this C-clip off and we can use a bearing puller, just a regular puller, and we'll get the this bearing off, and I think all these gears will just slide off anyway. They move a little bit, you know, like they're on a long keyway, like on the counter shaft, something like that. I didn't know it at the time, but I was progressing into an area that turns out to be part of the problem in the end. Now, what I said here was the gears are moving like axially, like on that counter shaft. Remember the one with the key in it? Axially, like this, in this direction. And again, they're not supposed to move that way. We'll dig into this a little further later. But again, I believe it turns out to be part of the problem, but it isn't the whole problem. If you have figured out the problem by now, you're a genius, because at this point, I still had no idea. That's what I think, at least. I'm not 100% sure here. If I can get a grip on this one, I don't know if there's enough room. Nope. All right, this should work. I hope. There it goes. Yep. Putting it back on is not going to be a problem. We can just push it with the press, but... And also the one that goes into the housing is not going to be a problem. All right. Got a spacer here. Don't let me forget that. Yeah, they just slide off on this keyway, just like on the counter shaft. So let me go label this stuff up, and orientation wise, you know, keep the boss toward the inside. The boss! And then we'll go ahead and press out that other bearing, and I'll have to run down and get 2 more from Bearings Marketing. Okay. Come on out of there. Push, push in the bush. That's a pretty damn good push. The new one's going to push on easier because, number one, I'm going to polish up the shaft the way it should have been in the first place. And number two, I'm going to put a little lube on it. Got it. All right, she'll come out now, just tappy tap tap. She's ready to go. Just stuck in the seal bore. So what I'll do is I'll bring the bearings and bring the shaft and this housing down to Bearings Marketing with me. I'll be back later. All right, I'm back from Bearings Marketing, and I went to the store to pick up groceries and so forth. I have 2 bearings here, brand new. Unfortunately, I do not have a new seal. He did not have a seal in stock this size, or even close to it. Like, as far as the only flexible part on a seal is the width. You're stuck with the OD, you're stuck with the ID, but usually you can kind of fool around with the width a little bit if you have one a little wider or a little narrower. This one in particular is a 20 ID by 45 millimeter OD by 10 millimeter wide. So if we had a 7 or 8, there'd be no problem. But unfortunately, he has nothing. So I'm going to have to order this online and reuse this for now. I'm going to put it in later, maybe tomorrow, or I may actually order one and wait for it. I'm not sure, because when I take the center, the inside shield off rather on the bearing, this thing may have more propensity to leak. And so we're going to have a good seal. This is a cheap ass freaking seal anyway, a single lip garbage seal. Maybe we'll just wait for one, I don't know. That can go in later on. What we can do now, though, is we can install the bearings and the shaft, and then just deal with the seal at a later time. And then install this on the machine and try it out. What I wanted to go over really quick was an order of operations decision you have to make with something like this. You have a bearing that goes inside this housing, and a bearing that goes on the end of the shaft. Now, the one on the end of the shaft is not a problem. The one that goes up past this taper, and there's a spacer there, and then the bearing seats against that spacer, is a little bit of a challenge, so you don't damage the seal. So you have 2 choices. You either put the bearing on the shaft first. We're going to do this one last, but as far as installing this into the housing, this one first, or you put the bearing in the housing first. That's the way I'm going to end up doing it. The reason why is if I put it on this shaft first, even after I put a spacer on there, put the bearing on, press it down, so now you have a bearing sitting on here, and now I have to put it into this shaft, into this housing rather. It's going to end up going like this, and that means I have to push on the outside of the bearing race to push it down into this housing. Now I do have something to do that with. This 30mm socket fits perfectly with just a little clearance. Unfortunately, it's not deep enough to accommodate the length sticking out. It bottoms it out and you're never going to get it all the way down. And I don't have a lathe to make a spacer. I need a lathe to fix another lathe. So again, I'm going to put this bearing in here first using this, bottom it all the way up to the shoulder where it goes. Then we'll put the spacer on here, and then what we'll do is we'll turn this over in the press, go this way with it. Of course, we have a spacer, like I said, on here, and so we're going to support the center of that bearing, the inner race of that bearing, with this. This in concert with something else that's not quite long enough will be perfect for it, because it's just basically a little bit bigger than the shaft and about the size of that inner race. And this did not fit. It was a little bit small. So again, I need a lathe to fix it. I need another lathe to fix my lathe, but I got a milling machine with a boring head. So we just popped it into the milling machine with a boring head, just eyed it in center-wise, ran this down twice and opened it up. So it wasn't very far off anyway, and now we've got a tool we can do this with. I'll probably put a like a brake caliper piston underneath that to make sure it's got enough depth. We may not need it though, because remember, we're going to be stopping about right there. We have to accommodate for the width of the bearing, but we may need it ultimately. So I just wanted to kind of go over that. You have to think about this stuff ahead of time, because if you do it one way that you can't get the bearing or the shaft into the housing now all the way, you either have to make something on the fly to do that, or take the shaft out halfway or the bearing out halfway, take it out the rest of the way, like off the shaft, and then reverse your order, and you have a high probability of damaging that brand new bearing at that point. Might as well do it right the first time. There we go. That was my socket hanging up on that snap ring groove. Hope it didn't ding it, but I can always clean it out with a tool. Piece of sandpaper or something. Hopefully it comes out. Alright, we're all the way down on that shoulder. No drama there. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, it looks fine. And on the inside, it did take off the inner shield, just to let you know, so the oil can get in there. Nope, we bottomed out on the plate, so we'll just add something underneath there. Alright, yeah, and I got that spacer on there. Okay, so this end is done, except for the gears, of course, but as far as the bearing goes, this is ready.
I don't think so.
Seems like an awful lot of wasted space in there. But that's the way it was. The bearing was definitely, you know, I would put two bearings in there if it was me, but well, that would be because there is two bearings on the end. I only bought two of these because I had a brain fart. It's been one of these days. So there's supposed to be a second bearing, so they're in tandem. And so I took the best of the other four now that I have. This one's pretty good. I think it was on the tail section of the one of the shaft here we took out of there. And took that cover off, and I reached in and I got that cover off too. So the cover's off on both sides. This is the brand new one I just got back from Bearings Marketing. We'll put this one down on top of it as well. Do the same thing, upside down, just like this. And then that'll give us our two bearings, and it'll allow the oil to get through to both bearings. And then so that seal really becomes of great importance for us because of the fact that we're going to need to really seal it off well. Which makes total sense. How much bearing on the outside of it. Which leads me to believe that this is probably not the problem with this, because what are the chances that 2 bearings failed? Now I got a little axial load there that I don't like. So what we're going to end up doing is giving this a whack. Kind of like when you do 2 tandem bearings on an axle. And when we do that, it's going to relieve the stress inside there. So because the 2 bearings are up against each other, we got a little axial load on them. It's a little bit bindy. So all we really got to do is just give it a good smack like that, and it loosens right up. And then what we can do is just give it a back the other way. Make sure that it's all seated and it becomes nice and loose. There it goes. All right. Well, for some reason, the circlip groove is not proud enough. This spacer was really distorted. I had to smash it straight, but I'm pretty sure that's flat enough. And I know I've got everything in the right position, so I'm not really sure what the hell's going on with this. I'll put a little bit more force on. Maybe it's got to settle or something. I don't know. I don't get it. There it goes. All right, here's the finished assembly, less the seal, of course. Out of bearing, I'm going to be honest with you, is not the best thing in the world, but it's the best of the other 4 that I had, leftovers. And I just screwed up and should have gotten 3 more of those 6004s, and I only got 2. So I got the brand new one on the back. I took off both of those sheaths. You don't need it at all because it goes through a through hole in the casting. Slip fit. And then of course the one on each inside side of this front bearing set. But here's the thing I want to bring up to you. I noticed this while this was installed. Well, this thing was installed before. I could reach down in there. I could actually slide this whole gear mechanism, this assembly, slightly along, axially till it would stop. In other words, there was lateral or axial movement of this when it was in situ before, and you could take this thing and you can actually wobble it a little bit, clunk, 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 like that before. And we can't now. It is really solid right now. I think what was happening, those bearings just failed essentially in the front. I think the back one was pretty good. It essentially lessened the amount of crush or press on this thing because the bearings are worn, and is allowing this thing to move back and forth a little bit. That could be accounting for the slamming and also some of the other noise.
That's bullshit.
Because right now there is absolutely no axial movement on this thing, which I would assume that it wouldn't need to have that or have any of that. Because now we've got that circlip is right where it needs to be, right up against the inner race. So is that one. And the 2 bearings are butted up against each other. Got the spacer in there that you're supposed to have, and the spacer in here you're supposed to have. So and the gears are in the right position. The larger one was on the inside, and it faced this way because I made marks on it. Here's the inner, and that's facing the inside. Inside this, I mean. And then this one is toward the center. So that's essentially the same verbiage, if you will. And that's how she goes. So I think we'll be okay with this. But I run out of time again today. So in this part 2, we'll just get it knocked in tomorrow. And then that's about the only clips I'm going to film on it tomorrow, because we're going to have to wait for a seal. I've decided I'm going to replace the seal. I'm just going to wait on one. So probably won't get that for a couple of days. But we can certainly knock this in and hold off on putting the pulley in. And then once we get the seal on, do the pulley and try this thing out. Hopefully get this back in service and clean up this ginormous mess. All right, folks, I put everything back together. All the gears are in there. I can't remember what I put in the last clip. I apologize, but it's been a few days. I have it all ready to go, and I don't have the motor straightened up exactly where it needs to be, but I have enough tension on the belts to show you it running with the feed shaft disconnected. I've had that disconnected for most of these trials as far as identifying the noise. And so that way it isolates, and removes that from the equation. So this is how it sounds. I'm going to run it at 600 to start with, then we'll go to 800. So C3. Okay. Let me tell you something. That sucker is freaking quiet with that oil in there, that gear oil. I'm going to discuss this gear oil a little bit more in a bit. I'm going to make a slight change to it, and ultimately may even make further changes. But anyway, listen to this again. Again. I hear that, it kind of hung up. All right, but we still have a problem. And I've isolated the problem to guess where? The motor itself. And to be honest with you, this may have been the entire problem right from the start. Because hopefully I can make it do what it's been doing. Now you hear when it spools up, that kind of rough noise, that almost a little growling. Right there at the end. And it gets progressively worse. There it goes, a little bit worse. Right there, you see that? And you see how the belt kind of changed its tension? It got tight, or loose and then tight. Right there, that's a good shot of it. All right, so I suspect we have a bearing or other mechanical problem in the motor itself. Now you saw it just in that last one right there. That was a really good representation of it because you can hear it, I'm sure, and you can also see the changes in the RPM by how much this belt is either under tension on the tension side of it, because the way the thing turns, it turns clockwise. So the tension is on this side and it's looser on this side because it's pulling essentially this way. Well, what happens when that thing does that and then it goes clunk at the end, it's not the gearbox that's controlling that or causing that, it's in the motor itself. So then all of a sudden what happens here is that you can see the tension change. You can see it go from taut to loose, and then you hear it clunk. And what that's doing is that's actually changing for a moment the speed and the torque on the main input shaft, the one I just changed the bearings on. And what that's doing is it's throwing a little clunk in there along the entire drivetrain of this lathe, and I think that's really what's been causing the noise all along. Something in the motor slows down momentarily, and with the inertia inside there and all that play in those gears, it clunks back and forth. And it's again because of a deceleration and an acceleration back up to speed from some fault in the motor. I believe again it's a mechanical fault with bearings. So this is what's been causing the problem, and you can really hear it when it does that clunk at the very end there. Let's see if we can get it to it again. You hear that clunk at the end, and it kind of gives you that metal to metal noise. Now I don't know if there's a a shield in there or something, or a fan that's broken loose, or it could be just the bearings themselves. I don't know what that is, but so you see that. You see how the belt tension does it, like I showed you before. Does that mean that we didn't need to change all those bearings? Probably. Does that mean that the bearings were good? No, those bearings were bad. We can verify that when we took them apart. They probably would have been fine for what it's used for. Now it's better. And Is this the right gear oil for it? Well, like I said, we'll discuss that here in a little bit, what I'm going to do on top of the oil that's in here, literally on top of it in a way, in a moment. But first things first, we got to pull this motor, and we have to go through it and probably change some bearings out and maybe some other problems in it, and maybe even send the damn thing out. I don't know. There ain't no motor shops around here, I don't think, anymore. So if it's anything that needs to be addressed, we are going to have to address it ourselves. I have a problem, and it's not alcohol. I don't drink. My problem is I don't have a lot of space. And if I bring this around, this is how much space we got. Now there is, of course, a wire that goes into the motor, right? Now, not the round part, which is where the either the start or run capacitor is. I'm not sure what this has. But that box right there is your connections box. And the wire goes in from the back side. I think you can see that is part of it, I believe, right there. So I think I can get the cover off that box and then do a classic reach around in there and get the documentation of what wire goes to what, then disconnect them. That's the only wires that go into the motor that I can tell. And then we can unbolt it and slide it out. That shouldn't be too much of a big deal. I'm sure it's not that heavy. It's not that big of a motor. It ain't like the behemoth that was on the mill. I mean, that sumbitch was huge. So we're gonna get her out of there and then put her on the bench, take it apart and see what's going on. So let's get started. Well, I don't know how much you're gonna be able to see, but for now, I'm just gonna loosen up the motor bolts on the front and the back. So what we'll do is we'll move this like that and pop these guys off. This, believe it or not, takes a metric belt. These are not they. A CFE 0321. Whoops, from Traction Supply. It takes like a 13 millimeter or 12 millimeter belt, and these are 1/2 inch. So do the math, it's pretty close. Come on, baby, there we go. Before we do anything else, I'm gonna go ahead and fire the motor up with no load on it at all. But I did do it off camera, which is why I'm gonna show you now. That sounds a little strange. Kind of clunks a little when it first starts out. It really slams. And it sure as hell ain't in that great a balance. I don't really know much about these motors, to be honest with you. But as far as taking them apart, I mean, it's a motor. There's not that much to it. But, you know, as far as the way it's spinning, it's definitely out of balance. And it's not this, certainly not this small pulley here. I mean, the way this thing is going. I don't have any radial or any axial movement that I can feel, but that doesn't mean the bearings aren't bad. Yeah, it definitely sounds like she's a little on the ill side. Okay, shut it off and unplug it. There's just no room to get you in here. There's no practical way to do that. So when I get done with that, we'll meet you over on the bench with the motor. All right, here we are over at the bench. Nothing on this one. And that's from the capacitors. This is a dual capacitor. And speaking of capacitors, I said before about that noise. And I'm going to say this wrong, I'm sure, because I just haven't studied on this too much. And there's a contactor in there, is essentially on a centrifugal thing with weights in there that contacts either one or both of the capacitors, start the motor, and then when it gets up to a certain RPM, it disconnects. And I don't know if these are both start or run capacitors. I don't know. We're going to be taking these covers off here momentarily. We'll take a look at that. It's not terribly important because the motor is starting and it's running up to total RPM. It's definitely not lagging at RPM, and that's what I'm trying to say here, I guess. So I don't think it's a windings issue or a stator or a rotor issue. I think this is a mechanical issue with something rubbing in there, like that little thing that does the starter contacts, or bearings, or both, or something else. I don't know. But the first thing we need to do is just get this pulley off. There's two of them. I thought there was. I only got one. Dummy? Oh yeah. There's one grub screw that's over top of the keyway, which is typical, and the other one is down below it, 180 degrees across, that goes into the shaft itself, which I don't like very much. I wish it was like a copper or a brass tipped one, but we can deal with that later time. It's not terrible. We shall take the back cover off because I think that's just the right way to go at this point. Let me get something for parts or screws and so forth. Like I said before, I don't believe this is electrical. I think this is a mechanical issue. Well, it would seem to me that the fan is made into the motor shaft, so yeah. So if anything, it's going to have to go that way when it comes out. It's a plastic fan, of course, because it's made in you-know-where. Dun, dun, dun. 150 microfarads, plus or minus, it says 20 and 10%. I'm not sure if this is a run or a start capacitor. It just says motor capacitor. I'd imagine this is a run. Okay, so 450 volts, 20 microfarads. Yeah, this is the same one that's in the air compressor, and that's a run capacitor. So this has got to be the run. I'd say that this is the start, 150 microfarads. Okay, so I think the next thing to do, we'll prop this up on a piece of wood and we'll get the front cover off. It is an induction motor, so therefore it has no brushes, but it does have something that contacts the rotor, I'm pretty sure. That was the thing we heard spinning, that keeps the start capacitor engaged until the motor starts, then it disengages it and the run capacitor takes over. Some sort of like mechanical centrifugal switch of some sort. And I don't know what it's called because I don't deal with electric motors too much, but that's how I understood it at least. I'm not sure. Shit, I'm not sure of anything. 1, 2, that's got to be 8 mils. Yeah, this does not have a long shaft. You know, a long stud. That's even better. That goes through from one end to the other. You know, like on the Valkyries that hold the rack together. This has just got bolts. I mean, I don't mind having a long shaft, but sometimes it can be a pain in the ass. There may not really be anything wrong with this motor except it's a piece of shit. Oh, by the way, it is a 2-horse. I couldn't remember. But yeah, it's rated as a 2 horsepower, 220 volt motor. Of course, we have it at 240 because 220 is what the power they have over there where this is made. Dun, dun, dun. Let's get Bertha. Bertha hasn't come out and played for a few days. I don't want to break anything either. Camera moving. The rotor can't go this way because of that fan's permanently attached to the back side. Gotta go this way. There it goes. You'd think that'd be a little easier to get off. Well, it's got a ring in there that it registers on, which makes sense because, you know, there's not a whole lot of clearance between the rotor and the stator. Well, I imagine the bearing is pressed into this housing. Well, that's... All right, let me think about this and we'll come back. All right, here we go. This is what we do. You spin this thing up so you're hitting on one of the tangs. Yeah, I see that little gizmo in there. Contactor thing. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we got to remember we got a wavy washer that goes on the end here at this bearing. I got to be honest with you, that bearing does not look or feel that bad.
No kidding. Let me go out to my truck and get my surprised look.
Now, I don't know exactly how this works. I've only read about it a little bit here and there, but here's your contactor that goes up against this ring. And this ring has got wire, you know, this contactor's got wires that go into the winding. What I'm thinking happens here is the contactor switch. It's like a set of points right here. Deals with keeping the start capacitor engaged to the start winding, I'm assuming, that goes into the stator here via this little switch. And then once it gets to a certain RPM and the motor starts, this disengages. Now, if you look at the way this capacitor, yeah, doy. If you look at the way this centrifugal switch works, if I Right now it's in obviously the resting position. In other words, the motor's not turning. Once it starts turning, see what happens when we pull the weights. This would mimic the weights coming out with RPM. When the weights come out, the disc gets pulled in, see? The disc gets pulled inwards. So at full RPM, it's like this. So the disc got pulled away from that switch. So that means that in the normal position, this switch is the other way. So it's contacting that disc, and it's providing power from this wire to this wire that engages apparently that starter capacitor and thus the starter winding. And then once it speeds up, it releases and comes out to here. And most likely that has something to do with the run capacitor, or it doesn't do anything at all. I don't know. This goes nowhere. This one goes nowhere. So I am right about that. See, I'm trying to figure this out as I go here. So right now you can see that in the position where it's starting, it is making contact between these two wires because this is pushing this down and connecting those points on the inside. So when the RPMs come up and this centrifugal switch, this disc rather, pulls in, it allows this to come out and just rest against this guy, and this guy goes nowhere. It just goes to this board here, which is an insulation medium, plastic or something, like a PCB material. When the motor slows down and stops, it goes back to here and it's ready for the next start cycle. So that's how this thing works apparently. And it is working because it's ramping up. But why we have all that noise in there, I do not know why. And why is it vibrating so much? That would lead me to believe we have a bearing problem, but this one sure as hell don't feel bad. I mean, there's a little bit of play in it, but maybe it's at the other end. Maybe the other bearing is bad. So we got to go ahead and pull that cover off, and that cover is going to come off with the rotor and that fan, and we'll pull the whole rotor right out and take a look in here. I mean, we'll take a really close look at all of this stuff. I'll do that off camera, and I'll show you anything I find if anything is weird. I mean, I can tell right now that these solder joints in here look like a 12-year-old did them. That's because it's made in... Dun, dun, dun. Normally, if I have a motor that's got the long studs, I will mark it, like put a couple of stamp marks with a punch tool, and that way I know which one, what the orientation is when I take them apart. But I saw that this was not going to be that much of a big drama issue. There we are. Much nicer. This whole rotor should come right out. Yep. Man, that rear bearing does not look bad either. I wonder what in the hell's going on with this thing. Why is it making so much all-fired noise when it starts up? Let's move this guy out of the way. But now you got a really good look at this thing. So again, when the weights come out to play, like this. Ouch, that hurts. So when the weights come out like this, it allows that contact to disengage, which was previously engaged for the start side of the winding. Those look fine. And whatever's that noise spinning down is just, probably needs a little more grease on this thing because it's wearing into the metal, but that's probably pretty hard. Like, it's not stainless, it's rusting, but usually this metal is heat treated, so it's because it's spring steel of some sort. I just don't see a problem with these bearings. Well, wait a minute. Oh yeah, there is some movement in this one. And I know it spins well, but I mean, you can definitely move it. But you know where it's made. Dun, dun, dun. Because it's made there, it's got shit bearings anyway, so we're going to change both of them. Well, I don't know how we're going to change both of them, considering we got to get this fan off somehow. I wonder if that screws on somehow. You think there's a thread in there? But I'm probably just breaking it. It's got a bunch of flashing around the top of it, like from it was pushed on and melted in place or something. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at this a little further off camera and see if I can't figure out a way to get this off. Yeah, this fan just pulls off. I got it coming most of the way already. She's coming. But it's almost there. Man, I'm so close. A little bit more fondling of this thing and...
Yes! Yes!
Here we go. Yeah, it's just plastic on there that's probably just pushed on with maybe a little glue. So this is what we're going to do with this. We're going to leave that son of a bitch off. No, I'm kidding. We got a nice flat spot right there on this shaft that tends to correlate with a somewhat of a flat spot left in there. When we put this back on, we know it goes flush with the end. So we're going to do this with this cover off. We're going to put it in the milling machine, find center on this shaft with this flat up. And then we're going to push this on, and then we are going to drill straight through this little hub and into the shaft and out the other side. We'll use ample amount of coolant so we don't melt the plastic, and then we're going to put some sort of a pin. And then we're also going to glue the thing with some JB Weld or something like that. JB Weld, this is like nylon, so it probably is not going to work too well, but either that or we'll use that seal-all, that tank sealer seal-all. That stuff works very good. It'll work on plastic gas tanks as well as metal, and those are made of many times of like a nylon derivative type material. You know, this thing could have been certainly moving a little bit and been out of balance, but you know, it's made of plastic. What is it going to do? We'll give it a good cleaning too, but that really wasn't all that much drama after all. That ain't moving none. I don't have any pull holes either. We'll put it in Dad's old vise and just hang this between the big wooden vise. So this is hanging down. Give it a couple of shots. I'm sure it'll come out. Let's go do that. I hope you don't mind if I sit down for this. You know what? We may have to put this in the press. Yeah, but I'm afraid we're going to shatter this cover. It's awfully thin and it's made out of cast iron. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to just run some heat around this casting right here. I would think that's enough. Well, boy, is that tight. It is not budging. Now the bearing is really trashed. Gee, I wonder why. I'm gonna get the bigger hammer. I need some more force. I mean, if I blow the cover apart, we'll just get another motor. Not too worried about it. Well, you got me on this one. I can't get this thing to budge. Well, this is a janky press setup if I ever saw one. The armature won't sit between the rails here, the rotor. So, you know, what am I going to do? It barely, I mean, it almost clears. If I had another 1/16 of an inch width here, it's always 1/16 of an inch short. Tell you what, story of my life. This thing would fit right down in there. We could do a less janky press setup here, but we're gonna do what we can do. I figure after all that hammering, this is gonna be a tough push, so I want to put some aluminium in there. I like to protect this shaft a little bit with an aluminium. I knew I'd find some use for all these aluminum blocks that I got with the Kurt Weiss that came out of that CNC shop up there in Hudson or whatever it was. All right, look at that. Now, how come that wouldn't move before? All right, fucking crazy, I swear to God. You gotta be kidding me. Oh, okay, but that's exactly what I want. Oh, you know what? Maybe just heating and letting it cool. That's what I wanted to happen. I wanted the bearing to come off with the shaft and leave this cover alone. So yeah, great. That's what I wanted. Like I said, I wanted the bearing to stay on the shaft because this is how close this thing fits, just about. Anyway, doesn't matter. This bearing and that bearing I think are different sizes. That makes sense. This is the torque side of it where the pulley goes. So we'll just take the numbers off of them. I'm going to get these off camera. This is pretty simple stuff, so I'll just pull them off with a puller over on the bench, and then we'll pick it up when I get some new bearings. Because I'm going to go ahead and order them. I don't think I'm going to drive down to Sarasota and get some more from Bearings Marketing. That ride sucks. Let me tell you what. It's like 9 miles away, and it takes almost 40 minutes to get there. So McMaster Car, yeah, McMaster Car delivers quick. I'll pay a little bit more for them, but they'll be really good bearings. So, okay, while we're waiting on bearings, we got other things to take care of. It looks like one of these weights from that little centrifugal switch fell off. It must have been loose. I did not feel nor see any of these weights on either side of this centrifugal switch loose. Must have just happened just through manipulation of it, but it shouldn't have happened. So it must have been loose. It could certainly be contributory to the ultimate causation of this lathe gearbox banging, which I'm going to show you here in just a second. We are very, very close to it right now, if you haven't already figured it out. But right now what we got to do is I got to get this spring pack apart so we can go ahead and peen those rivets back in and put that weight pack back in on this side. At first I thought these were long springs that go straight through that plastic body right there, but no, they're two separate springs. You can see I'm popping one off right there, and then I can turn it around and get the opposite one off. You actually have to get, I think, both sides off on this and get everything loose, otherwise it just pushes against itself and it doesn't cooperate, because we got to get this whole ring right off, just like that one came off right there. And now I can get it over to a block or other hard surface and go ahead and repeen those rivets back in place. I went ahead and took both sides off and repeened both sides, and here I am with some accelerated footage, putting them back together. A little fiddly, but not all that bad after all, and it functioned perfectly. Okay, let's deal with refixturing that fan on the end of the shaft. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do here in advance. I'll just go through it with you as I do it in overdub. I'm just leveling out the flat on that shaft right now. It does not have to be perfect. Typical operation or standard operation, edge find each side, do the half function on the DRO, and we'll find the center of this shaft. Again, it is not, I repeat, not all that critical, but we do want it fairly accurate. Alright, you can see I got the fan nice and cleaned up with some simple green, and I don't have a pulley drill, so I'm using a universal bit that's long enough to go down through and get me a mark on that shaft through the plastic, as you can see I'm doing there. All I want is a little divot for a mark, so when I put a drill bit down through here, it doesn't walk off. That was the only thing I had that was long enough to do it, said the wife. I originally said I was going to pin this fan back in place and glue it. I'm not going to do that. This is a tap drill for an M4 fastener. In this case, we're going to use a screw. I'm going straight down through. You can see it come out the center they used to machine this thing. And then we'll put a tap likewise straight down through the whole thing. We'll power tap this one to get it started and then take it out of the chuck, and we'll finish it up by hand. I don't want to take a chance of breaking a tap. That would suck. These are M4 screws from my carburetor screw stash. They are brand new screws. They have lock washers, but they're not going to work too well in that plastic. But this is a trial fit only. Of course, we have to put this all back together in the motor case. But right now, I'm just showing you how it's going back together with one screw on each side. And then we'll also use some blue Loctite, a good quality blue Loctite, and then get these things torqued down. They're not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to use any glue on the shaft or any seal all or any JB Weld or anything. I just don't see the need for it. And if I need to get this apart again in the future, you know, because you know where it's made. Dun, dun, dun. And therefore, it being a piece of crap, this is going to be the easiest way to do it if I ever have to take it back off again. All right, so motor's all back together with new bearings in it. Turns really well. And I greased that little plate, if you will, that little plate that springs in and out on the front side here to disconnect the start capacitor from the run capacitor. And we're going to go into capacitors here in a second because I'm going to admit some mistakes on this, or some assumptions that you may have already maybe figured out already. But as far as the motor goes, you know, it's no drama putting it back together, getting the bearings pressed back on. Speaking of bearings, the bearing numbers are 6404 for the front bearing. I'm sorry, the rear bearing here is 6404. These are FAGs, and I got a KBC 6505, which is for the front one. They're both from McMaster Car. The reason why you see them here is because I ordered an extra one each, so an extra pair, you know, because they're a common size. I may use them somewhere else. Or if I have to go in here and screw something up and blow the bearings apart, take it apart again, I got another pair. As far as the capacitors themselves go, well, let me show you this. All right, so you have two capacitors on this motor. I have color-coded them so I know where they go. The blue one goes over here, the blue dot, and a red dot over here. And there's the one with the red dot. So you have one capacitor that is a 20 microfarad, plus or minus 5%, at 450 volts AC. And the other one is a 150 microfarad capacitor, plus 20% minus 10%, 50 to 60 hertz, at 250 volts AC. This one here, the 20 microfarad, is the run capacitor. As far as I can tell, it's the run capacitor, and it goes over here. And this would be the start capacitor. Now, I took a look at these. I really just looked at these quickly when I took them out in the previous clips, and then got the numbers off them. I've actually ordered one of each of these. Like I have a backup for the air compressor. That's this one here. That is a CBB60. Run capacitor is also a CBB60, but it's a different size, different values. So it's a different size physically. So this is 120 microfarad at 250 volts. And again, that's for my air compressor. That's a spare. So like I said, I only went over them really quick, but once I went over them in detail and I was handling them and looking at the numbers, look at the bottom of this one. It's domed out. And again, this is the run capacitor, the 20 microfarad one at 450 volts. And it's domed out, whereas the start capacitor is not. So yesterday afternoon, I'm getting in the shower, and all of a sudden I had this lightning bolt hit me, and I went, wait a minute. The start capacitor is obviously doing its thing, because this thing ramps up to full RPM without any problem, and it's when it reaches full RPM that we have a problem, and it starts going and then occasionally almost drops, you know, drops out for a millisecond. That's causing that banging like we talked about before. I believe that would be the point in time that the run capacitor would be taking over, right? And this is the run capacitor, the one that's domed out. So I thought about this, and after I got out of the shower, I put some clothes on first. You have to trust me on that. There is no video. And I came out here and decided to put my meter on capacitor mode and test that, well, both capacitors, but mainly I wanted to test this run capacitor and see what the values are on it. Remember, this is 20 microfarads at 450 volts. Now, I don't really trust this meter really well for it. If I had a true capacitor tester, you know, that does ESR and the whole thing, I'd be a lot happier, but it's all I have, so this is what I'm using. In this case, this comes up, I don't know if you can see this or not without me losing a connection, comes up to 9.29 microfarads. It's supposed to be a 20 microfarad. Now this has a 5% variance, plus or minus. That's well outside 5%. Hell, that's like 55%. And I said, you know what? This son of a gun is bad, or it's going bad. It's a weak capacitor. And I wish I had, like I said, a dedicated capacitor tester would tell me that. But I put it over in resistance on auto ranging, and I wanted to see what the resistance was on it. And I don't know if this is an accurate test or not based on the way this thing reads capacitors. Now, yesterday it was showing open. I wasn't getting anything at all on it. Now it's in the mega ohms. I mean, this is reading in the mega ohms, so I can tell you right now that that is not right. I don't know what the resistance is supposed to be on this, but I could look it up. But I'm almost 100% sure that this run capacitor is essentially on the way out. This is not burnt, this is paint. They painted this thing once it was all together, and that's why the fan is all nice and clean now, because there was paint all over the fan. I cleaned it off. I think the entire time that this thing, whoops, that's been acting up, sorry to kick you, there wasn't any problem in the motor bearings, and there was probably no problem whatsoever in the bearings I replaced in the gear head, and the whole problem was this failing run capacitor causing the symptoms and making me think that it was in the gearbox, because that's where I heard the noise. Until I changed that oil over into a thicker oil and changed the bearings, and it did quiet it down a whole lot. I mean, it really is super quiet once it runs. I really love the way it sounds. You know, until I did all that, I really didn't hear what was going on in that motor. I mean, I could hear the motor making some noise once I took the belts off and just had the pulley on here. You heard that too. It was definitely out of some sort of balance issue. I figure the balance problems came from two places. The fan was kind of on there squirrely and it was on there crooked, but also that weight issue on that the centrifugal switch. Being that that was loose, clearly that was contributing to a balance problem, and we went ahead and fixed that and fixed both of those things. So, am I a bonehead? Probably. Was it necessary to change the bearings? Not as far as an immediate necessity to do that. I'd say no. Is it a good thing to change the bearings in both the motor and in the gearhead, the ones that I changed? Absolutely. They're Chinese junk bearings. Remember, where this is made is dun dun dun. So, yeah. I think it's good preventive maintenance, but was it absolutely necessary? No effing way. All right? I think this was the entire cause. And I'm just not that experienced with that, so it's just something that evaded me as far as my brain goes. But it makes perfect freaking sense because we got it to essentially duplicate that symptom after doing all the bearing work on the gearhead and saying, what's wrong with this motor? I'm assuming it's bearings in the motor. Well, as we saw when we pulled it apart, those bearings were not that bad. Yeah, a little bit of play in them, but absolutely not smoked. But they're better now. They're way better now. Will the motor run better? Yes. Will it run smoother? I guarantee it'll run smoother. But was it necessary? No. So yeah, I probably spent about 150 bucks on bearings and things like that I most likely did not need to absolutely do, but I'm glad I did it. I've ordered 2 new capacitors, as I said before, and they're not here. I'm not going to get them until Sunday. Got them from the Jungle store. It's the only place I can get them quickly enough. There's no place around here like a motor supply place anymore. There used to be that you can buy capacitors. Once I get those in, I will put the appropriate value on the appropriate side, get the covers back on, and put this sucker in, and then we'll restart the video and we'll see how it runs. New capacitors are here. This is the one we want for the run capacitor, 20 microfarads at plus or minus 5% at 450 volts AC. Now this is the start capacitor. Now I put the original one back in here because it measured up correctly and it was starting. Put it in capacitor mode. Let's get the terminals on it, why shouldn't we? 20.11 microfarads, there you go. Yeah, 20 microfarads. As a reminder, make microfarads, 9.31. Yeah, very weak capacitor, less than 50% of what the rated value is. I'll cut the ends off, get them wired up properly, and get this back together. Now I'm going to put the motor in off camera because there's no room in there, number one. Number two, there'll be a ton of potty mouth, I guarantee it. It's very tight in there, said the wife. Okay, we'll see you in a bit. Okay, so here we are. We're all back together. I got the splash pan, or the whatever you call that, the shield back up. I still have the gear drive as far as the apron disconnected, you know, for direct comparison purposes. Oh, I don't even have the words to describe how much of a pain in the butt this is. Not its fault, it's my fault. It's too close to the wall, but this is the only place I have for it. I still have the light back here to show you that, to illustrate that, just how damn tight it is back here. And I've got all the wires hooked back up correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and get that light out of there. We'll plug it in and we'll fire it up using the inching button, and we'll use the main on-off lever so we can go in reverse as well. All right, let me get her plugged back in. And yeah, someday I'll probably put that Romex in conduit. All right, on, start. We are in 800 RPMs where it was giving us the problem. Now we'll use the lever from this angle, You know, the lever down here on the apron. Reason why I'm doing this is the example I showed you earlier in the video, in video 1 actually, of the banging noise. And I tell you what, I'll put it here so you can get a direct comparison. I think I said I was going to do that anyway, one-on-one. This one's a number of days after the fact because I didn't realize I didn't have a direct on the tailstock looking at the chuck comparison to the clips I'm using. So I want to be fair. So I'm going to go ahead and do one right now. Again, it's a few days later. This is a cold start. I haven't done anything on the lathe today. And compare it to the clips I'm using to show you the before. This will be the after. Here's reverse. Reverse again. And for one last time, forward. Now you'll notice that the gears sound differently in reverse. I would say that that's understandable considering it doesn't run very often in reverse. It's always in forward pretty much. So there's a certain amount of wear on those gear profiles based upon the direction they've been turned in all this time. As far as the oil goes, I'm going to leave this gear oil in here. It may not be the best decision ever, but I'm going to do it. The problem I have with it right now is that aeration issue. It still is aerating obviously quite a lot. I've ordered some stuff. It's kind of hard to find, but it's an anti-foam agent for industrial gear oils. I plan on getting that in, and before I put it in the lathe, I'm going to take a little cup, like a glass cup or something, and mix some of this gear oil in with that agent. Make sure there's no, issues with it because, it says industrial gear oil, whatever that means. And if it seems to be stable and, if I kind of stir it up aggressively, if it does not foam it up, then we're going to go ahead and put the appropriate amount into the gearbox and kind of tamping that down a little bit as far as the foaming goes. It's not really foaming, it's aeration. There's little air bubbles in it. So after this sits for a while, they all dissipate. But unfortunately, you're getting essentially air dissolved in a solvent. That's not always the best thing when it's a bearing lubrication medium. But I certainly love the sound of it being so quiet. I'm nearly done with the editing in this video, so I need to give you a quick outro. I had one shot, but it sucked, so I wanted to redo it. I wanted to just really get to the point. If it wasn't the bearings, which it wasn't, if it wasn't the motor internally and the bearings inside of it, which it wasn't, and it wasn't any gear problem or any shaft problem or anything else, and which it wasn't, then what the hell was it? What was causing that banging noise when this thing spooled up? It was this dead mouse right here is causing the whole thing. Yes, I am not bullshitting you. This capacitor, this run capacitor, is the cause of the whole problem. And the reason why, of course, when it spools up to that RPM that you're in that particular gear, that run capacitor takes over because of the switching inside the motor that we talked about. I showed you earlier, really. We didn't talk about it. And you didn't care anyway. You went to sleep. But this particular capacitor takes over at that point. And because it was failing, what you were getting was essentially a dropout and a kick back in. I guess that's the best way to put it. That's what was causing the banging in the gearbox. I replaced all the bearings absolutely for nothing. But I'm glad I did it because remember where this thing is made. Dun, dun, dun. I learned a lot about the lathe, had a good time doing it except for the motor removal part. And I hope you guys learned something and got something out of it as well. I made some big time assumptions on this, that it was all mechanical and it was electrical 100% right off the bat, because I realized I am not that experienced with electric motors, but now I am. Okay, immediately following the video, I got a picture I want to show you. I got to meet Paul Tuttle Jr. down at Thunder by the Bay in Sarasota, and yes, I am wearing my other Booth Machine Shop t-shirt. Just happened to be the day I was wearing it. Just like today happens to be the day I'm wearing this one. I have 2 different ones. Not like I'm in love with Adam Booth or anything. I mean, you know, he's a big teddy bear, of course, but not that I don't love him. But the thing is, it just happened to be wearing these shirts on these particular days. So don't go anywhere with that. Paul Jr. was fantastic. Super nice guy. I asked him 1 or 2 little technical things about how he does certain things from what I've seen on the old American Chopper videos. He answered them, and he actually suggested something I hadn't thought of in that particular question genre area that I was asking him. And so I said, that's a really good idea. His wife was there, his young kid, I'd say he's about 7 or 8 years old, maybe 10, I don't know. Really nice family, and he's a super nice guy. Very happy to be able to meet him and his family. And so that's pretty much it. So stick around. I got some other B-roll from a car show that I went to recently. We won't put it at the end of this video. This abomination is long enough as it is. To see that video, you know what you need to do. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Stick around to get notified when I put crap like this up in the future. And as always, thanks for watching. Don't just repair, restore. We'll catch you on next video.